Mainstream mental health is flawed, and I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm Andrea Clark, a former family therapist who walked away from the system to expose the truth. After my own journey from medication maze to holistic healing, I'm here to challenge the status quo and reveal the mental health truths most people don't know. The truth about mental health is your radical roadmap to wellness. Raw stories, expert insights, breakthrough solutions. This is where traditional modalities end and real healing begins. I am so excited to be interviewing Donna Marston today. She is a certified recovery support worker, family recovery advocate who is dedicated to helping families navigate the challenges of addiction. As the founder of Sharing Without Shame, also known as SWOS, Donna empowers parents and family members by providing workshops, coaching, and support groups focused on healing and personal growth. Drawing from her own experience navigating her son's addiction and recovery, she offers compassionate guidance, practical tools, and a holistic approach to recovery. Through SWOS, Donna continues to create safe spaces for families to share, learn, and rebuild their lives without guilt and shame. She is also the author of 4 books, including Peeling the Onion and Sharing Without Shame, which provides insight and support for those impacted by a loved one's addiction. Let's get into it. Donna, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. I'd love to just start by having you just share a little bit about yourself, about your background, and what led you to do the incredible work that you're doing.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I have a son who's a person in long-term recovery. And when my son started using at the age of 15, I didn't know what was going on. At the age of 18, things started to get a little worse. 20 to 25, it was full on, and it was not a good time. I can tell you I did a lot wrong because I didn't understand addiction. I didn't grow up around it, even though I grew up in the 60s and 70s. Drugs were pretty prevalent. Basically, I learned, like I said, I learned everything the hard way. I've taken what once was my mess and I've made it my message, turned my pain into purpose. And so for 2 years, my son found his recovery on May 11, 2008, which was Mother's Day. And it could have gone very differently. By the grace of God, it didn't. And 2 years prior to that, I hit my enough. And so when I hit my enough, someone had told me to read this book. And I was like, I am so sick of self-help books about addiction and recovery and enabling and all that. I can't. I just can't. She goes, no, just look at page 134. And so on page 134 of the book, Ask and Is Given by Jerry and Esther Hicks, was an emotional scale. It was 1 to 22, and I was number 22. I was at the bottom. I was in despair. I was, in the fetal position. I was an emotional mess, and I, unbeknownst to me, had learned to live in a dysfunctional relationship with my son. And in that moment, when it was like you hit me with a 2x4, something shifted and I hit my enough. And I knew in that moment that I needed to get better. I didn't know how, but I needed to get better. So I printed it off, put it on my desk, and every day I would look at it, because when you're living in that world, and it's your child, and there's nothing you can do. I was so numb, I couldn't tell you a feeling I had. So when I looked at this list, I could identify a feeling for that day. And I could vibrate myself up. When I realized 22, I'm really a mess. A couple of days later, anger resonated with me. So I took a pillow and I went in my bedroom and I beat the crap out of my bed and released it. And so I would work that to get myself leveled up. So today, I live by this emotional scale, and I keep myself between 1 and 7, because number 8 is boredom. Whether you're an unhealthy helper, you're the codependent, you're the person with a substance use disorder, when you get to boredom, all bets are off. That you're not going to vibrate down and your life isn't going to get messy.
Right. Tell us why you say that. I'm curious your thoughts on why boredom is kind of the tipping point.
Well, because then you get into your head. Your head takes over and tells you you're this, you're that. A person with a substance use disorder, they often, it's, whether it's trauma or whatever goes on, their head tells them a lot of negative stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody loves you. You're worthless, you're this and you're that, because that's what they hear often. So idle hands and idle mind, you just don't always make the right decision. So 1 to 7 is a healthier state of mind. It's a healthier being. And however you do it, by keeping positive thoughts in your head, when you start to go negative, turn that around. I have bracelets that I wear, and one says blessing and another one says hope. And if I'm going to have a bad day, I might use this for cognitive therapy, and you give a little snap and it snaps you right out of a bad attitude.
I love that. Okay, so you found yourself, enough is enough. And then what happened from there?
Well, it was a long road, a very long, lonely road. I went to, this is only my opinion, Al-Anon is great for a lot of people. For me, when people say it didn't work for me, it's because I didn't work the program, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Okay.
They irritated me. Because remember, I'm new to all this. And I would ask a question and they'd say, keep coming back. And in my mind, because denial's a wonderful thing, just give me the answer so I can go home and save him, and then we can move on. And so, I didn't have time to keep going back. So when
we're looking for how to fix it.
Yeah, I wanted the answer. Okay. And what I learned the hard way is what worked for somebody else may not work for me, right? Everybody, it's very different. So then I just kind of kept knocking on doors looking for where can I fit in, as a monk. Because keep in mind, this was in the late 1990s to early 2000s. You weren't talking about addiction in your family.
Yeah, the resources were way different than now.
Right. And you'd be blackballed in your community. I kept that secret. Well, I thought I kept it secret. A lot of people knew. But in my mind, nobody knew. I went to our local, Granite United Way, and I met this young lady, and I'm sobbing, going, I don't know what to do. I can't find help. I don't know what to do. So she introduced me to this gentleman who then brought me in a little bit under his wing and introduced me to a lot of people and sent me on a recovery mission for the state of New Hampshire. And I was the only mom. We went camping. I don't camp. I'm not a woodsy girl. But I learned to whittle, and I met all these cool people that were in recovery, and we all made a commitment to each other and to our state. We were going to bring something back because we were up in Vermont. And my commitment was I'm going to open up family support groups because there was nothing. And I founded Family Sharing Without Shame, and I ran that for over 12 years in Concord, New Hampshire, and Manchester, New Hampshire. I held 2 meetings a week, and I'd have 15 to 40 parents attend my meetings. Once a year, I'd put on a day of healing. That was the first support group and parent in the state of New Hampshire who had Narcan available. That did the first training for parents so we could have it in our homes. This has organically grown into this business called Sharing Without Shame. And all it was is I learned the hard way that I couldn't love my son into recovery.
Yeah.
And so this journey that I've been on for the last 20-something years has taken me to places I would never have imagined.
That's incredible. And you've had such a massive, profound impact and will continue to do so.
And I wouldn't change any of it. As the emotional pain I went through, everything I went through got me to where I am today with an understanding and with, all kinds of trainings about addiction and codependency. I don't like to say to parents enabling because it's kind of, the word enabling to me felt shaming and blaming for loving my child. Sorry, I use, when I work with parents, we talk about unhealthy helping. What does that look like? I see their shoulders relax. They're like, oh, let's talk about that. We can do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you have a neurodivergent or sensitive kiddo who experiences big emotions and are looking for a way to help them decompress, get grounded, and self-regulate, you've got to check out Outtree. As a therapist and mom, it's my go-to for sensory soothing tools. My daughter loves their sensory swing. After a long day at school, it's her favorite for relaxing and getting focused. It's a safe space to down-regulate her nervous system. You can find the perfect sensory tool for your kiddo and family at outtree.com. OUTREE.com. Use my code MHM for 24% off. You can also check the show notes for the link. I'm really excited for people tuning in to understand where their power lies, because you feel very powerless when you love somebody who is harming themselves on it, whether it's addiction to substances or addiction to something else or addiction to unhealthy patterns, but specifically addiction to substances. What is unhealthy helping? Like, how can they identify? Can you give them some things to potentially self-identify? Because I do want to say this, radical acceptance is a beautiful thing. It's hard, but once you radically accept what you actually are in control of and how you may be contributing to your own suffering, it really can set people free.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to share some of that. Like, what do you share with your parents about what unhealthy helping looks like?
Well, basically, in a nutshell, it's doing for your loved one what they could and should be doing for themselves.
That's good.
It's just that simple, right? I mean, you have parents with adult, 50-year-old children, and they're paying their electric bills and they're paying their car payments and they're paying their mortgage. They're doing everything that the adult child should be doing, right? An adult child could be 70, 75 years old.
Right.
And so typically when I was running parents and actually running the meetings in person, people were paying for their kids' drugs. They would take them on drug runs. And so that kids could do the drugs at home thinking they're safe. And I had a couple of parents, they found their children dead in the morning, all in the name of love. They were trying to keep them safe by allowing it in their house, not realizing you're not keeping them safe because you don't know what's in it. Unless you have fentanyl strips and you're testing that before, they're not doing any harm reduction. Want to do this, then you have to take a harm reduction training so you have a clue of what you're dealing with. And that's the problem. And so many of us think we can love our kids into recovery.
Right.
And we can't. And so, it's just learning to make our kids be accountable. So what happens very often is, and my son lived with me most of the time. There were times he moved out. But here he is in our house because I didn't want to do anything to upset him in fear he'd go get high and could possibly die. In my home that my husband and I are paying all the bills for, we're walking on eggshells, allowing him to be comfortable in his addiction.
Yeah.
Right? Not knowing. So it's like I'm walking around with a raw egg and this is my son's addiction. I'm afraid if I drop it, it's all over. He walks around with a raw egg when he's attempting recovery. He drops it, it could be all over. So we all mimic each other's behaviors. But it's just basically it's doing for them what they couldn't do for themselves.
Right. So what is that like when you work with a parent and they get to that point of realization, or maybe before they have realization, it's like, but
my kid's different than yours.
But if I don't X, Y, and Z, this will happen. How does that conversation go? How do you help them along with processing that and seeing it more for what it is than maybe what the meaning they're putting to these things?
I have to be very careful because the parents are fragile. Whoever the unhealthy helper is the most fragile. So if I just go, hey, you need to knock it off, what's going to happen? They're not going to work with me.
Right.
So I have to be very gentle. So what I do is we talk about what's your why? Let's look at why you're doing what you're doing and let's see what we can do differently. So I used to be on the governor's recovery task force for drugs and alcohol. And this guy that I knew, he never had children. He was a person in long-term recovery. So I was there representing families on the task force. And he said to me one day, you parents, you do what you do because it makes you feel good. That's what it's all about. And when I was stewing and I thought, how dare he doesn't have children. He doesn't know what this feels like. I took my job as a mom real serious. And probably about a year later, I really digested that.
It's a hard thing to understand, but everybody means well, but they don't understand their motives, right?
Right. So when I saw the truth of it, realized I talked about what I wanted. I wanted my son to live a healthy, happy life. I wanted my son to be drug-free. I. So we talk about the I's, because what did he want? And if he wants to live a life doing drugs, that's his choice. I can't change that. I have to figure out how to love him and how to have a relationship, a healthier relationship when he is unhealthy.
Yeah.
What does that look like? That's the other thing.
What does it look like?
What does it look like? Well, it looks like this. So I had this mom, and it was her second marriage. Her son was unhoused, and he was probably in his 20s because he had stolen from them. He wasn't allowed in the house. And she was sick over it. She just wanted to know he had a meal every night. It happened to be good weather at the time. So I said, did your husband just say did he say he couldn't come on the property? Or did he say he couldn't come in the house?
Yeah.
She said he said he couldn't come in the house. It's okay. You have a picnic table? Yeah. Why don't you make a dinner, have your son over, sit at the picnic table. You can give him the leftovers. He can go on his way, and he's fed. And you haven't disrespected your husband, but you're also showing your child, you're working with your child, so you can drop the seeds of when you're ready for treatment, I'm here to support you. You can drop seeds of love. You can also, instead of, and this is a big mistake, I did it for years. I had to stop talking about his addiction. And when we had times together when he was sober, to say, hey, remember that time when we went and did this? Boy, was that a good time. Or I brought out pictures of when he was little and some of the things that we had done together. And we would laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And just bringing those happy memories to his life. And then just say, know that I love you. I will support your recovery. Whenever you're ready, I'm here to help you.
Yeah, that's really profound.
It works. When we stop preaching at them.
Yes.
Telling them what to do with our fingers pointed. But when we're pointing our fingers at our kids, we have a part in that. There's 3 fingers coming back at us. So we have to look at our part. And that's pretty much what this guy was telling me. What's your part?
Yeah.
And I had to look at that, and everybody wants their child to live a healthy, happy life, but we have to heal our trauma from this.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at ourselves. I had very bad behavior, all in the name of love. I would remind him of the pain and suffering he caused me.
Right.
How unnecessary is that? He's beating himself up on his own. He doesn't need me to pummel him too.
What I find, this is something I used to, when I was practicing, speak with parents about all the time, is you're trying to convince them, but they're experiencing this as shame, guilting, they're feeling disconnected from you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're desperately trying to convince them of how you feel, or to help them see, like, if they just saw, right? And it's really hard to not do that.
It's like being in the military, right? You level everybody emotionally and then you build them back up. And that's what parents do. I know that's what I did. Take him to his knees and then I'll rebuild him with my love. What a mess I made. And it's hard. It's extremely hard work. But
Yeah.
I had to learn to love him unconditionally.
Yeah.
And with healthy boundaries. I had to protect my stuff and my heart.
So what did that look like, loving him? Like, just a couple of, and I know you've given some already, but a couple of examples when you started learning that skill of doing that. What did it look like? What kind of support did you have in place? Because we all fall back into patterns sometimes unknowingly. So how did you help move yourself along where that happened less and less? And what did that look like between the two of you?
Well, I started working on my own recovery.
Okay.
because, I'm in recovery from codependency. I'm in recovery from being a people pleaser. And so I had to look at that. I took a very lonely, hard journey, but eventually I found my way into Codependence Anonymous.
Oh, okay.
And that was so helpful for me. And I was introduced to Melody Beattie books.
Yeah,
So I started to go to some AA meeting, and I started to understand the thinking of somebody in active addiction or early recovery. And I started to have this compassion for people in the rooms and thinking, man, these people are honest and lovely, and this is wonderful. And so from all of that stuff, I created my Family Sharing Without Shame. And in a way that when people came to my meetings, inadvertently, they learned about addiction, codependency, unhealthy helping, all of that stuff without it being slammed down their throat or shoved down their throat. Or I would listen to the conversations the week before. The following week, I would have an opening reading that talked about that. And then we'd open that discussion. And then I'd have a reading that was positive at the end, that about love, light, and, just unconditional love. So they could walk away with a positive attitude and hopefully with some coping skills so that they could go home. So like one mom couldn't stand the thought of her son not living there, and she couldn't stand the thought of him living in her house. She goes, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, you have a tent? She goes, yeah. And I said, have him tent in the backyard, and he can't come in the house. You know where he is, and if that's where he's going to do drugs, he's going to be out there, but you don't have to allow it in your house if that's what you're comfortable with. Because we can only do what we're ready to do. We can only do what we're comfortable with. Just like the person in active addiction, right? We mimic each other's behaviors. It's a cat and mouse game. Who's who? When you talk about like the cycle of addiction, when my son is irritable, restless, and discontent, and he starts using drugs, and I'm going, what's going on? This isn't my child. And then the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind start to take over. We're going around this cycle, and I'm following him, and I'm going, I don't get it. I don't know what's going on. My gut's starting to get really sick, and I'm feeling out of sorts. And then the natural consequences start to happen. And then I'm feeling shame because my son's been arrested. And then if you bail me out, I promise I'll go to treatment. I'll do whatever you want. Walk out. He'll talk the talk. Okay. We get him into treatment. Now I'm cautiously optimistic. And as we still go around, and he's talking the talk, he's doing great. As soon as he gets irritable, restless, and discontent, off we go again. And what happens is I had to get out of that cycle and then see it for what it was. It's chaos. It's a mess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But we don't know it when we're so consumed by rescuing and saving.
So where can parents who resonate with this, parents, spouse, whoever, friends, where can they find resources like you found to help them get educated and gain skills and get support to maybe try to do things differently on their end?
Well, they can contact me.
Love it. We're going to have all your info in the show note.
Yeah, www.sharing.com, sharingwithoutshame.com. And, I have books. This is my newest book, Sharing Without Shame. And then I have a journal that goes with it, Healing Without Shame. And then my Just for Today and my original book, Peeling with the Onion. And this is about my journey of my pain and suffering and how I was able to get out of the fetal position and get out of bed.
I love that. Is all of that, I'm assuming all of that's on your website?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to direct people to that resource. All your links will be in the show notes. I'm really excited for people to dive into your resources. What does your relationship with your son look like now?
It's amazing. I always say a curse can be a blessing and a blessing can be a curse. And the curse of addiction almost destroyed us. But today we found our sanity. We restored our relationship and our health, and we're closer than ever. His story is pretty amazing. And it's a shame that society, actually media, doesn't show the success stories, because there's so many people that are living beautiful lives that are in recovery. And my son's one of them. He now has 3 little kids, and he has a lovely wife and a home, and he owns a business with his brother, and very, very successful. And here's a kid who struggled in school because he was bored.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important for people to understand it's not about the drink or the drug, it's the why. Why is somebody, what are they masking? What hurt them so bad? Or is it's in their DNA or whatever it is? What's that about? Because you remove the drugs and the alcohol and there's pain someplace. And that's what needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes when certain programs or the way things are portrayed on the media, it's very much about addiction to the substance. And, my father was an alcoholic and a gambleaholic. I almost went down the path of alcoholism as a teenager, like a young adult. And I actually decided I was really terrified. I have family members who are in active substance abuse currently. So clearly it's in my epigenetics, right? I quit. One day I was like, you know what? I can't do this. I don't want to be like my dad. Like, this is scaring me. And I quit, and I did not touch any substance or alcohol for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I remained sober in one of the most tumultuous times of my life, going to college, going away from home, getting myself off of medication. So I was as a 19-year-old, just decided to detox myself, which is ridiculous. But anyway, I made it through. And for me, and I'm not saying this for anybody listening, listen, this is my disclaimer. I'm not saying like, hey, you should test out substances. But I had this feeling. And I kept saying, no, I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. And I don't even remember who said it to me. And they're like, are you sure you're an alcoholic? Are you sure that you weren't medicating and coping with the time that was going, like with what was happening in your life? Because you're fairly well adjusted at this point, right? And I sat with that for a while because I was terrified, but I sat with it. And I ended up deciding I'm going to put my toes in the water and see. At this point, I don't really drink because we know so much about what it does to our health. But I've been able to enjoy a few drinks on vacation without this like going off the deep end. I say all that to say that there's so much that people don't understand about why people turn to numbing. And it's not always just alcohol or narcotics. It's food, it's sex, it's porn, it's something, right? Alcohol and narcotics are some of the loudest things that you're most easy to get in trouble with, right? Gambling, if you gamble, my dad used to gamble us out of rent, and then there's other things that you can kind of almost like hide more easily. And so that's the thing is I love that you say, what's the why? Because at the end of the day, if you don't address the why or the wound or whatever, it's going to be really hard to gain the skills and heal enough to where you can combat not going back to whatever it is or not hopping around to something else. You know what I mean? If you don't get to the core of the issue.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because there's so many people that might be in the halls of AA or NA and they might be abstinent, but they haven't done the work. So they still might have the behaviors, even though they're not ingesting, right? Yeah. They're not drinking or using drugs, but they can still have the behaviors until you can go within. Because my head was my hell until I learned to settle it down, and we all have stuff, whether you grew up around drugs or alcohol or not, everybody has a little something that we work on, an inner child that a teacher hurt or friends bullied or whatever. And until we can go and work on that and bring that little kid out and love that little kid, that's when we get better. And that's what all of this is about. It's really about everybody looking inside and healing our inner child, typically.
Absolutely. I love that. So do you have any last thoughts or words of hope for people listening who might be in a relationship with somebody who is in active addiction?
Yeah, hold on to your hope. And as long as your loved one is still walking on earth, you never know when the miracle of recovery is going to happen. Be hopeful, be loving and kind. Think before you speak. Ask yourself, is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it hurtful? And if the answer is yes, zip your lip and work your own recovery program.
I love that.
Lead by example.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Donna. This is such an amazing conversation. I'm really excited for people to check out all the resources that are going to be linked in the show notes. And thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. All right, guys, until next time. I am eternally grateful you tuned into The Truth About Mental Health. If this message matters to you, please spread the word by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with someone who needs this knowledge. Let's keep reclaiming our mental health together.